Hello, I'm Rick Murdock. We're going to talk about leadership communication today. See a screen here with some slides. We'll reference those a little bit. Hopefully you'll be able to see them and read them okay through the magic of technology. And then over here, a board that we'll take some notes on. I'll try to write legibly enough that you can see what's going on there as well. We'll take about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and just kind of talk through some really basic principles that hopefully, if implemented correctly, will help you interact with your people in ways that will get the best out of them, get the most out of them. And we'll just kind of start at the beginning and work our way through a few topics, if you don't mind. First thing I'd like to do, though, and this will be interesting because there isn't an audience sitting in the room that I'm talking right now, but I would like you to interact with me if you wouldn't mind. I'd like you to think of a good leader that you had at some point in your life, someone that did things that you thought a good leader ought to do, someone that was able to motivate you to be your best self, someone like that. Think of a good leader, and then let's just make a list of attributes that good leader had. What was it about them that made them a good leader? And I'm going to write them down over here. Okay, so this is kind of a list that we've come up with, maybe. And one thing I might point out here as we read back through this list is, well, first of all, we've got listener right here. That's a communication skill, isn't it? Keeping people motivated, willing to do the work, spend time with people that care. Visionary. How do we know someone's visionary? Through their ability to communicate vision, right? Giving recognition, that's also heavily reliant on communication. Being knowledgeable, it's hard to show knowledge without being able to communicate it. Respectful, hard to show respect without communicating. Empathy, hard to show empathy without communicating. Hard to thank people without communicating. Hard to keep people accountable without communicating. Hard to show that you care. Most of these things boil down to being an effective communicator. And so it's important that we practice our communication skills if we're going to lead other people. So we're going to boil communication down to its basics right now, if we could. Have here a little chart that kind of outlines communication. Really, we're only ever doing two things when we're communicating with each other. We're either collecting information or disseminating information. We're either collecting or disseminating, and there are kind of two ways that we do it. There's the silent collection and dissemination, and the audible collection and dissemination, externally created, internally created. Let's just go through each one, see if we can list them. I think you might be familiar with these things. First one is listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Yeah, I knew you'd be familiar. I told you. I predicted it. There they are. The interesting thing about these four things is that we do them all the time. We're really, really practiced at them. We have habits and we have abilities in each of these areas. And we don't really think about it much at all. But if we were to just kind of sit down and think about it for a second, we might see some patterns. Like, for example, when someone speaks something, someone else can listen to it. And when you listen to things, you can write them. And when you write things, you can read them. And when you read things, you can speak them. And these things are all interrelated. One interesting thing is you listen to something and you can speak it. But when you listen to something, when you write something, you can read it, and then you can speak it. You can't go straight from write to speak so much, unless I guess you're the writer disseminating things at the same time. But the point is here that we have four things that we've done a lot in our lives. Anybody here had some sort of a reading class at some point in their life? Everybody. A writing class? Yes? Anybody take a speech class at any time? A couple of us. What about listening class? Anybody take a class that was specifically for listening, learning how to listen, gaining skills in listening. Anybody? Yeah, we don't have those classes available to us. But what if I were to tell you that this one is one of our most important leadership skills? Of these things, all of them are important to leadership, but listening might be one of our more important ones. And I might group into reading, like reading not only words, but reading body language and reading situations and reading other things like that. And listening is similar to that in that we can pick up cues from vocalization and we can listen between the lines a little bit as well as we read between the lines. Here's maybe why listening is one of the more important things that we do. Maybe the most important thing. We do the most of it. We haven't learned how to do it. We haven't taken any classes on how to do it, but we do the most of it. It's hard to turn these off. And in fact, sometimes it's cacophony, right? And it's confusing and it's hard to filter through things. And so skills in listening are really important. We listen for 45% of I don't know who this is based on or what group, but according to this particular study, 45% of the time we're listening compared to the 30% of the time that we're speaking and 16 and 9% for reading and writing, respectively. So, what does that mean? Why is listening so important and how do we do it? What does it do for us? Anybody? Yeah. Listening is how we get to know people. It's how we get to know situations. It's how we understand the world around us in a lot of ways. And all of those things lead to understanding context. So being good at listening is an important thing for us if we're going to interact with people that we're trying to lead. Let's talk about just a couple of things that we can do when we're listening that will help us be effective listeners. First thing, here's some things that we can actually do, and then we'll practice it. Okay, we'll take a second to practice. We can concentrate, sit or stand still, and then we can interact. So, when I say we concentrate, I'm talking about specifically not doing something else inside our heads when we're listening. Anybody do that? Anybody else kind of take a break and go somewhere else for a little while someone's talking? Yeah, we all tend to do that. The reason we can do that is because our brains work so much faster than people speak. Right? Who here knew exactly what I was getting at by like the second or third word? Yeah. Our brains work so much faster that even when I'm speaking at this pace, there's all kinds of time in between and we can do all kinds of things. We can think about the next thing that we're going to say, or we can think about the game last night, or we can, and we can kind of check back in with the person talking because our brains just work that much faster. And sometimes, we know what that guy's about to say. We know where that sentence is going, and so we're just going to check out for a minute, let him get to the end of it, and then we'll chime back in with our sage and great advice. Why would we say sit or stand still when somebody's talking to us? Yeah, mostly because it shows that we are concentrating. And showing that we concentrate often leads to actually concentrating. Interacting means that we are engaged, and that's important too. A couple of things to avoid. Jumping to conclusions is one. Don't assume you know what's going to be said because you might not. And a lot of times we fall into the trap like, we know this person, we've had this conversation 1,000 times, I don't want to engage in it, and sometimes we'll miss something. And as leaders, it's important not to miss important things. Limit our distractions. One of the biggest distractions we all have is this thing right here, right? How often have you seen someone that you're trying to talk to. I'm sorry, what? Feels rude, doesn't it? Yeah. So my suggestion, when someone engages you in a conversation, find a pocket for your phone. And then listen. Close the door, turn off the radio, look at the person, etc., and then don't leave mentally. Don't plan your next statement, as tempting as it may be. Okay? All right, so the whole reason for all of this, the whole reason that we'd want to get good at listening is because we want to understand context, because context is really important. Context from your audience's perspective is as important as anything that you've done. You have to understand your audience. And your audience, in this case, are the people that you're trying to lead. And what do we mean by context? Well, we mean understanding who they are, understanding what they understand, understanding where they come from culturally, or what challenges they have physically or mentally. It's understanding all of that. It's putting the person, your audience, the person that you work for as a leader, putting them into a full context, meaning we understand their whole person. Why is that important? Why is it important to know the context that comes from people? Why do we need to know that people have contexts to begin with? Sometimes we don't think about that. Well, I'm thinking it, so why wouldn't they be thinking it? Well, it's important to think about. Know your audience, understand that there are varying viewpoints, and then recognize your own biases. Our context might be different than our audience's context. And sometimes we don't even know it. Sometimes we don't know our own contexts. And that can be a really dangerous thing when we're trying to communicate. All right, we're going to have somebody volunteer to read this, please. Just jump in. Oh, before you even start, let me just say this is not a study at Cambridge. This is just a meme I found on Facebook. I was going to claim to be a study from Cambridge University. It's not. All right, go ahead. I couldn't believe that I could actually understand what I was reading, the phenomenal power of the human mind, according to research at Cambridge University. It doesn't matter what order the letters in a word are. The only important thing is that the first and last letter must be in the right place. The rest can be a total mess, and you can still read it without a problem. This is because the human mind does not read every letter by itself, but the word as a whole. All right, nice. How many of you were able to follow along as soon as the reader got started? Yeah, we all did, right? Why? Why were we able to do that? What are some things we can take away from this? Yeah, spelling isn't important. Okay, that always comes out, sure. What else? I might say, why would spelling be important first? We need to address that before we move on. Why is spelling important? Yeah, it shows competence. Yeah. Okay. What else can we learn? That when we read, we're actually just interpreting pictures? Yeah, sure. What else? Let me ask this. Why were we all able to just follow right along and understand and come to the same conclusions with every word as the reader read? Context, right? We all came with the same context. The reason we were able to do that is because we all speak and read English. If we had somebody that spoke English as a second language, maybe didn't speak English as a second language, maybe didn't know English at all, maybe they could phonetically pronounce English, would they have been able to do what we did? No. They didn't have the right context, right? Context comes with us, and often we don't even think about it. And often our contexts are shared within a group, which makes it easier to communicate in hard situations. Shared context, great. That's great. All right, I'm going to show you something about context, if I could. I'd just like you to take a look at this white dot right here. We're going to stare at it for about 30 seconds. And while we do that, that's how we're going to set context for the next task that I'm going to ask you to do. Just stare right at this dot. I'm going to turn off the lights for a second. Stare right at it. We're going to take 30 full seconds. It's going to feel like a long time, but it will help us set the context we need to set for our next task. Okay, we're getting close. Keep your eye right on that white dot. All right, let me tell you what the next task is. I want you to look at just a plain white slide. All you have to do is just keep your eyes on the screen and look at and see a plain white slide. Okay? Keep your eyes on that white dot. All right, I will provide the slide. All you have to do is look at it and see it as a plain white slide. Here we go. Yeah. How'd you do as far as just seeing a plain white slide? Anybody? Right, it's hard to see a plain white slide when we've set context that makes it so your eyes are adjusted some other way, right? You can't complete that task in the way that it's described because you brought a different context with you. Some of you will be seeing an American flag for a while. Red, white, and blue, right? All right, so one more thing. Just keep in mind that your brain will bring context with it that maybe you're unaware of. Other people's context, they might be unaware of things too. So our communications then become very important for setting shared contexts. And understanding our audience and their specific context become very important in setting a shared context. Like I said, sometimes we aren't even aware of our context. I'm going to put up another slide. It's going to have a black plus sign kind of off to the right. I want you to just put your eyes on the black plus sign. As you do that, you'll see a green dot just going around through a circle of pink dots. Just keep your eye right there. Focus in on it. And before long, those pink dots will start to fade. They will fade out. And if you don't move your eyes much, they'll just kind of go away altogether. They're fading for anybody yet? Yeah, it's trippy, isn't it? That green dot's just moving around, and pink dots go away. They go away. Your brain's doing that. It's setting some context. It's like, those pink dots must not be important. But what if I were to tell you, as you keep your eye on that plus sign, what if I were to tell you that that green dot doesn't actually exist? There is no green dot. Did you believe me? Follow the green dot with your eyes. Huh. It's not there, is it? That was just something that your brain did as those pink dots started to fade. So eventually, we would have stared at that plus sign long enough that eventually those pink dots would have gone away and all we would be seeing is a green dot going around in a circle, and none of that is real. Our brain just did that to us, and we would have sworn it, given enough time. One of the most important things we can do as leaders is check our biases, double check our biases, and understand that people come into situations of communication with biases that might not be the way we see things. We have to be open-minded enough to communicate in honest and direct terms so that when something like this happens, we can talk through it. We can shift our eyes to follow the dot instead of just focusing in on that plus sign without any compromise. All right, one more thing. Let's talk about vectors for a second. It's always risky to talk about math concepts when you're in front of an audience, but these are vectors. Who can tell me what vectors do? Yeah, they're a physics term, right? They show direction and magnitude. So the direction is the way it's pointing, and magnitude is how long the line is. Let's just imagine, as an analogy, that we are all vectors, and that you have been assigned to be a leader of a team of vectors, and your mission is to set direction and maximize magnitude. Okay, keep that as your mission in mind. Let me show you how we can combine vectors, by the way. We've got two vectors here. We just move them together, and there's your new vector, a little longer. If they're going different directions, you can combine them like this. And there's the new vector. So, back to our scenario. You're the leader of a vector team. There's your team. This is you. Your job is to set direction and get the most magnitude out of these folks as you can get. With the team as it is right now, this is what your overall magnitude looks like. Not bad, right? We're heading sort of in the right direction. It's a pretty long line, looks good. But what if we were to actually get all of those folks, all of those vectors, heading really in the same direction? This is the same team, but now they're all headed in the same direction. I won't say the right direction. Hopefully it's the right direction. But if we were to combine these, we quickly run out of room on this slide, so let's scale it back. There it is. That's the team vector compared to that first team. Look at that. If we can, at least in the world of vectors, if we can get people going the same direction, we can really maximize some magnitude, can't we? What if we have a team like this? If you can't see that, we've got vectors that are either focused right on each other or completely ignoring each other. And they're all pretty much the same length. So what is our overall vector for this team? Basically cancels itself out. It's nothing. If we're too focused on each other or if we're ignoring each other completely, then we get nothing out of our team. We're not heading in the right direction. We're not heading in any direction, really. What about this team? This has all vectors heading exactly opposite of where the leader wants them to go, except for this little brown noser. He's like, come on, guys. Anyway, what's the overall result of this vector team? It's a negative, isn't it? Heading the wrong way. Okay, so yeah, maybe we've stretched this analogy just a little bit far, but the analogy to me is correct. That if we can't get people going the same direction, we won't maximize our potential. And so the way we do that is we understand context and we communicate in ways that are simple, that will show vision and will send people in the same direction. We want to build a team with direction. We want to build a team with direction. That's my presentation. Thank you.